Time now to pay tribute to some women of note. After well over half a century, the World War II era still looms large for many of us. And even though we may think we know just about everything there is to know about those times, they continue to yield some surprises. Billy Taylor now on a rediscovered chapter of our musical history.
The girls and I would like to give you our conception of La Cucaracha, sweet and hot. La Cucaracha, La Cucaracha.
Everything opened up for women as 1940 and 41 rolled around. It was great fun because I was born at the right time.
It was the decade of the Great War. Men were doing their patriotic duty, heading off to fight. And women were doing their part too. It was the time of Rosie the Riveter. And what a time for Roscron.
Most of us were so young, we really didn't know how much fun we were having. But in looking back, we were doing what we wanted to do.
I had never been away from home from my family, for that matter.
It was also quite a time for bassist and vocalist Colleen Ray.
So for me, it was an adventure. And getting paid for what I do, can't beat that with a stick.
Hot from Harlem, we bring you the Susie Q.
While the male musicians were away, nearly 100 all-girl bands were formed to take their place. Here's Ina Ray Hutton's Melodiers. The International Sweethearts of Rhythm. Rita Rio and her all-girl orchestra. Only a few of the bands recorded, and fewer still made films. Most of the groups have been forgotten today, but in her recent book, Swing Shift, historian Sherry Tucker has written about this remarkable period in jazz history.
They got a lot of press where what would be written about is what they were wearing, or whether they were, how many single women were in the band, or how patriotic they were.
How did this affect them?
One strategy was to play as much like the well-known male bands of the day as possible, to take solos and to play with power and with volume, and to take the opportunity to prove that women could play.
Colleen Ray played guitar with the International Sweethearts of Rhythm.
An average set probably included a couple of jump tunes, some blues. We always played blues.
I feel so lonesome, I don't know what to do.
And some ballads for slow dancing, you know, because all of our music was geared for dancing.
I don't know what to do. I need my man who tell my troubles to.
Some of the most popular bands started at black colleges. The Sweethearts of Rhythm from Piney Woods, Mississippi, and the Prairie View Coeds from Prairie View, Texas, performed at school events and eventually began to travel around the country raising money for their schools.
They were popular because they played well and also because they represented historically black colleges.
Eventually, many of the bands turned professional. Colleen Ray joined the International Sweethearts of Rhythm after she graduated from New York's Juilliard School of Music.
There were days, there were weeks when we were playing someplace every night. Just riding in the bus, getting out, getting dressed, getting ready, and playing the gig that night, getting back into the bus and going to the next town. That kind of thing. And once in a while we'd have a day off or two.
Jump, jump,
to achieve the full swing band sound, women had to play instruments only men had played before, like trumpets, saxophones, bass violins, and drums. It made for some awkward moments.
I couldn't handle playing my horn and giving it all I've got, you know, and the way a man would play his horns and not worry about is his shoulder strap showing because he's got something on here where the sleeve's going to come down.
For black women, there were far more serious obstacles to overcome. In some parts of the country, they couldn't even stay in certain hotels. Colleen Ray remembers how they traveled and dressed for each night's performance.
Well, now in the Sweethearts, we had our own bus, which had upper and lower berths in it, just like a Pullman car on a train, and a little bathroom in the rear. And we slept on the bus. Our berths were in the bus. That's how we traveled.
In the South, they lived by the Jim Crow laws and played to segregated audiences.
The white patrons would sit upstairs and we'd be down, and our patrons would be down on the floor dancing and so forth. Because white people would mostly come to observe. They weren't coming to participate. And if they were coming to participate, then there might be a rope dividing off the hall, white people on one side, black people on the other, that sort of thing.
Roz Cron was one of the few white musicians daring enough to play in a black band.
In our band, we had very light-skinned and very dark-skinned and everybody in between. And it was always difficult for the law, the sheriffs, to determine if one was white or not. And this was frustrating to them because even one drop of blood meant that you were categorized as black.
One night in a southern town after playing a dance, Roz and a black GI were arrested for walking down the street together.
A car was shadowing us, following us. The man got out of the car. I noticed he was a sheriff. I gave him Mrs. Jones' name, the manager's name, and where we were staying, and putting on my thickest accent. Try to throw him off. Nothing worked. And he was really, really horrible toward the young GI who was in uniform and everything. And I was a nervous wreck because he put us both in the car.
She did spend a night in jail, and they were harassed by police a lot. But
how'd they get her out?
Two of the lighter-skinned women of the band went to the jail and said, she's our cousin, you've made a mistake.
Despite the racism and the rigors of traveling on the road, the girl bands played on.
A lot of you have written in asking for the full treatment of our theme, 1 o'clock jump. And for the first time in the history of Jubilee and Hot Horn Hall, not only one band, but two bands are going to rip the reach and batter the beat. On my left are the Sweethearts of Rhythm, one of America's top all-girl bands. And on my right, our own Armed Force Radio Orchestra.
The Sweethearts went to Europe on a USO tour.
The GIs just fell in love with us and almost demanded that we be sent over.
But the triumphs of the girl bands were not to last.
When I went home, hundreds of thousands of GIs were going home too. So there was very little work. In fact, I don't remember working very much at all. And I went to work in a bank. Aside from having my two sons, those were the best years of my life, really.
Most of the women in the girl bands faded into obscurity, a footnote to history. But not all of them. Some, like Colleen Ray, still play regularly. The spirit of the girl bands lives on.
Ahead, why winter is like music to Minnesotan ears.